This is Too Many Lawyers. I'm Royal Oakes.
And I'm Connor Oakes.
And Connor, we are going to talk about the tragic shooting of the CEO on the streets of Manhattan.
Definitely the top story of the week.
Yeah, and my gosh, the shocking thing to me is there are fans of the shooter. The shooter, of course, this is on Monday. The shooter apparently, allegedly, has been apprehended in Altoona, Pennsylvania. A person of interest, who knows if they actually got the guy. But I think it's also symptomatic of a larger problem we can get into. Plus, Connor, I'm very excited about this. We're resuming our special feature at the end of the show, Guess the Verdict.
Ooh, can't wait.
Where I give you the facts of a case from real life, and you get to guess the outcome.
So we get to put my lawyerly chops to the test.
Exactly right. So just to remind folks, if you're new to the show or if you need a little reminder of what it's all about, Connor and I are father and son, millennial and baby boomer, progressive and also conservative. I want to take the opportunity, since we have Too Many Lawyers on video now. If you're listening, that's great. But if you want to see us, check it out. Spotify, Apple, wherever. It's called Too Many Lawyers on Video with an exclamation point. Just like Jeb, Low Energy Jeb.
Jeb, yeah. You'll find us on YouTube, and that'll be the best way to see our smiling mugs at the same time you hear this delicious content you crave.
So 3 quick pictures that I'll describe for you, but check out the video and see it. I was driving through Beverly Hills today, Connor, and I saw this picture on the side of a wall. It was kind of a mural.
Yeah.
It says Beverly Hills, and it shows the Monopoly man with a top hat, a silk top hat, and a gigantic bag of money above the words Beverly Hills. Is that a good look for the city of Beverly Hills?
No, it is odd that
I don't think it was endorsed by the city council.
Yeah,
Should they just rip it down?
Odd that they sort of put up with this kind of graffiti, because anybody who's played Monopoly knows that the Monopoly man is kind of a villain in this, in this canon. He's kind of the
and part of the time he's in jail.
Yeah, it's true.
He's get out of jail free card. They kick him out. He flies through the air. It's really fun.
He's out there doing crimes, and I think people this sort of graffiti is endorsed because it's obviously it's tongue in cheek, but. There is, I don't know how many of our listeners/viewers have ever been to Beverly Hills or lived in or near Beverly Hills, but the culture is just so self-obsessed with the fact that I live in Beverly Hills.
Gangnam style.
Basically, yeah. There we are.
Isn't Gangnam
the
South Korean equivalent?
Yeah, it's a neighborhood in Seoul that is basically the same thing as Beverly Hills. And I would say there's an incredibly high percentage of lawyers that you run into, plaintiffs' lawyers, guys who own billboards.
That's not good.
And bus benches and everything else, trying to advertise, hey, come to me if you've been injured, who have official business addresses in Beverly Hills.
If someone's stolen your Rolex or your jewels, come to me.
Well, they need to be able to say to their clients, look, I'm a Beverly Hills lawyer, so obviously I'm going to get you the big bucks. There's no way all of these people have addresses in Beverly Hills, but they've got like a P.O. box, basically, in the city. So it's a culture, an obsession with wealth and money and status,
it's
and
the
the
PR
Monopoly
problem.
man exemplifies it perfectly.
So here's the second visual aid. I mentioned, we're a progressive and a conservative, but I don't think I specified which. Now, this will give you a hint. Now, here I am with my hero years ago. Standing there with William F. Buckley Jr. Okay, so that'll give you a hint. Now, here...
And he didn't even sign the picture? Come on.
He didn't sign the picture. And here is Connor's favorite brunch dish. It's avocado toast.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Now, based on those clues, who's the conservative and who's the millennial
really could
progressive?
The idea that avocado toast has gained this sort of mythic status when anybody who's been to one of these incredibly overpriced brunch places will tell you no one orders avocado toast and no one really likes it.
It's a myth?
And after it became a meme where people were laughing about millennials paying ridiculous prices for avocado toast, it suddenly showed up on more and more and more menus because people expected it to be there. And frankly, people expected it to be expensive. And I guess they're willing to pay for things just because they recognize them and they're expensive. So therefore, they must be good. They get it and they think, this isn't actually, I would rather just have anything else on toast.
It must have been a Don Draper account.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk this story about the CEO in Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
The killer apparently left some metallic calling cards, shell casings with words that seem to be protesting the fact that the CEO's company has a higher than average rate of denials of claims for health benefits. So... I mean, a lot of people were shocked, Connor, by the view of this journalist Taylor Lorenz, who basically, she didn't say, well, yippee, I'm happy he's dead, but she said, well, you have to understand, people are just really unhappy about denial of claims, so this is what you get. And she didn't seem really bent out of shape about it. I mean, do you think that was kind of shocking that she said that, and now a lot of people are lining up saying, essentially, yippee, we got to take these people down?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I agree. It is shocking. It is surprising. When you think a little deeper and you ask, would the average American be sympathetic to their health insurer or the personification thereof, the CEO of UHC, would the average American feel compassion or sadness on behalf of this insurer suffering a fate? In the same way, well, would they, if they've got a landlord that they really dislike, are they really going to cry over that landlord suffering? Probably not, because it's human to associate the person with the thing and the pain of paying rent, the pain of paying their insurance premium.
But isn't this a sad aspect of human nature? That you can't recognize that these are human beings, and this guy may not have been some sort of a horrible criminal?
Right.
Whatever the percentage of denials of his company happens to be, you don't shoot somebody in the back of the head on Manhattan.
Oh, of course. Obviously. And murder is bad, and no one needs to argue over that. And that almost makes it too obvious, right, for people. What's the point of having a discussion where we all look around at each other and somberly nod our heads and say, yes, murder is bad? Of course, people have that first initial gut reaction of, oh my goodness, this is shocking, this is terrible. Vigilante justice is at level 0, not a good idea for lots of reasons. And then, of course, the obvious realization that everybody comes to after 10 seconds of thinking about this, which is, this is only going to make things, frankly, worse, not better. There's no way that hurting someone at a health insurance company actually ends up with the system changing. Guess what? They're just going to hire more and more expensive bodyguard teams to defend folks, and they'll raise premiums to do it. They'll have to deny more claims in order to afford more bodyguards. So this ain't going to change anything. You remember that famous movie? Gosh, I can't remember who starred in it. Big movie star. But I was like,
talking about Charles Bronson, Death Wish?
No.
The vigilante justice guy?
No. I'm talking about the one where a guy goes into a hospital emergency room with a weapon, and he holds everybody hostage, and it's sort of a capsule movie of a hostage negotiation because his kid is sick and can't get treatment.
Oh, Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington, right. Thank you. John Doe or something was the name of it, I think. A reference to unidentified medical cases, right? So that is this American fantasy that if only we could solve our healthcare system with gun violence. Look, well, we've only got one hammer in this country, and it's gun violence. So how do we solve our problems with that? Well, everything looks like a nail. Let's do it. And that's obviously a terrible instinct and a terrible outcome and the wrong way to go about it. But we've been watching that movie on, HBO late at night, repeating on cable, whatever else, sanitized, of course, with all the violence taken out of it for cable, over and over for years. And the culture in our mind is certainly that, vigilantes are, I'm not going to say popular, but Marvel Cinematic Universe controls the box office.
I'll say it. They're super popular. And the movie that I thought you were referring to, Death Wish, Charles Bronson made the first one in 1974.
Right.
And then I think he made 3 or 4 more. It was just like a big career-defining deal for him. And this was 10 years before Bernard Goetz, the subway vigilante in 1984, shot 4 black young men. But Goetz had been a victim of a mugging, and he had a permanent injury, I think, to his knee. And so he basically did what Charles Bronson did in the movie. He's loaded for bear, and these guys try to mug him, and he starts shooting, and he was a folk hero. I mean, you had a city that was in the grip of crime anyway, and people were really, they rooted for the guy. They ended up putting him on trial, and they found him not guilty, except illegal possession of a gun.
Right.
And I've forgotten how long his sentence was on that.
Yeah.
Let me double check it because
I mean, a guy like that, while you do, a guy like that can become, a folk hero in the same way that this UHC CEO shooter, before his apprehension. We'll see how things develop now that he's been apprehended, and we get a more human, if this really is him, and we get a more human face on the guy. It might become more extreme, that people become able to identify with him even more if he has some sort of sympathetic story or a reason, if he's not just some wacko who seized on any issue that's a hot button topic. But he's probably going to come out with something like, close family member, whatever, friend denied coverage, and they said it wasn't medically necessary, and therefore they couldn't get the care they needed. And in his mind, his version of history and how it went, therefore they passed away. It wasn't the disease; it was the insurance company. Okay, I mean, I'm sympathetic, but to the plight and the situation, but that's not always how these things work. But that's maybe how the mind of somebody who's on the edge works.
Maybe so. We're going to pause. When we come back, I'm going to explain my theory, which is that populism is the reason for people cheering the shooting of the CEO of the health insurance company. Stick with us. This is Too Many Lawyers. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Too Many Lawyers. I'm Roy Lopes.
And I'm Connor Oakes.
And Connor, before we broke, I said my theory is that populism has caused this. Now, First we need to make the distinction, and I think you alluded to it. In the Bernard Goetz situation, he'd been a victim of mugging, and these guys were trying to mug him. In the Charles Bronson movie, I think some muggers killed family members of his.
Sure.
And then, he takes the gun and he goes and sits on the subway train and reads the newspaper, and the guy comes up to him with a knife, says, okay. He doesn't actually say anything.
Give me your newspaper.
Yeah. This New York Post doesn't grow on trees. Wait, it does.
Oh, shoot.
Anyway, so he blows him away. And so he was reacting to an attempted mugging, and he had that. Now we turn to the health insurance situation.
Right.
Okay. There's no mugging. There's no criminality. But populists who don't think about principles, who instead just think about their own personal health and welfare and wealth, they are willing to endorse violence because they're unhappy about something, specifically health insurance premiums, denials of claims in some sort of vague miasmic way. I mean, who knows if this shooter had a personal experience with a health insurance claim being denied. But to me, I got to tell you, having represented, full disclosure, insurance companies for 40 years at a law firm, I've seen it all. And I'll tell you, for openers, insurance companies pay the vast majority of claims, like a slot machine. Yeah. For some lines of business, it might be 95, 98%. Some others, 10 to 15% of health benefits get denied. People don't think about why their claim was denied. They're just furious about the fact it was denied and the impact on their life.
True.
I can't tell you how many times I had cases where the policy, and by the way, don't get me worked up about this, but by the way, the insurance industry, if you own a house and it's burned down, you're screwed. You've worked all your life for it. Except, you paid a few $100 for a fire insurance policy, and they pay the whole thing and they replace it. Health. Oh my gosh, you got a dread disease. You're screwed. You don't have any money. Your family's. Oh no, you bought the health insurance. Life insurance. You don't have an estate of millions of dollars, but you don't want your family to be bereft after you're dead. Oh, wait, they're going to have millions, and they usually get paid the vast majority of the time. But let me talk about, for example, the issue of lying on the application.
Oh, yeah.
So many cases I had where somebody lies to get a policy, and the policy right in there says, if you lied to get it, and if we'd known the truth, we never would have sold it to you, so it'll be canceled. You don't get your benefits, but you get your premium back because we're such nice people.
Right.
And so that happens. So
somebody comes in and says, I've never smoked in my life, and he gets a life insurance policy, and then 10 years later, he pays his premiums for 10 years. 10 years later, of course, he's been smoking like a chimney the whole time, and then he dies of lung cancer. It's obvious.
Or even better. Let me give you a better one.
Ooh, good.
The guy gets the bad news from the doctor. Sorry, pal, you got 6 months to live.
Right.
Have a nice day. He goes next door and he buys a life insurance policy, right? Have you ever been diagnosed with cancer? No, I haven't.
Right.
Oh, here's my premium. Here's my policy. Yippee, off I go.
Yeah.
And then he dies, and the widow says, I want the money. And the widow doesn't get the money because the insurance company has a right to investigate medical situations.
Fraud.
And here's the punchline. Everybody I've dealt with on the plaintiff's side who's sued, they have absolutely no sympathy with the idea of rescinding a policy based on a material misrepresentation. They can't get it through their skull that that's the way it is. And they fight and they sue. And I'll never forget, I had a case where a plaintiff sued, and there were all sorts of lies in the record. And so we go to trial, and I'm cross-examining the plaintiff, and I'm just rolling out one lie after another.
Right.
And so we take a break. And I go back to my counsel table, and the plaintiff walks out. And when the plaintiff gets to the back row, one of the younger associates in our firm was watching, and she told me what she heard. The plaintiff, under the breath of this person, says, "Bastard." All they could think about was the fact that they hate me, and they hate the fact that their lies had been exposed, okay? Yeah. So I get back to populism. People don't care about the economy falling apart or people having to pay double for lug nuts or sweaters or whatever. All they care about is that they want their tariffs, that they want their protection against foreign competition. Now, am I crazy here with my rant? I'll give the floor to you. Isn't this, at least in part, what's going on? People don't think about really what's right. They just know they hate big anything because elites versus the masses, that's populism. And so, they don't think about what's right and wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of political scientists would describe populism not as a set of ideology, like a category, a group of beliefs. Populism is not being pro-abortion or anti-abortion. Populism is not being pro-free trade, international trade, or anti. Populism doesn't have a specific definition because populism is a brand strategy. It's a technique for gaining political power. It's a way of appealing to people's self-interest. It's saying, hey, we're not going to talk about, like as you said just now.
It's the tyranny of the majority.
Well, it's not. It's appeal. It's populist. Populism is when a politician gets up and says, "I'm going to help you. I'm going to lower your taxes. I'm going to raise your benefits. I'm going to get you a job and implement a jobs program at the expense of some other portion of the economy, but it's going to benefit you, the voter, personally." Right? And that populism, you're right, that people in a broad sense don't think about, for example, in this case, the value that a health insurance company brings to a society. They only think about the fact that their claim was denied. So no doubt this shooter, if that was his motivation, and many other people who are complaining online about these companies are thinking of it through the lens of their own interest and their own unhappiness at having their claim denied. However, there are non-populist critiques of these companies, and there are valid reasons to think, well, if something is bad for an individual, and lots of individuals are all raising their hand telling that story, then it is likely that that thing, in this case, health insurance and the current system of health insurance that we have, is perhaps bad for a large group of people. Maybe even most.
The good news is you've got regulators. Every single one of the 50 states has a commissioner of insurance whose job it is, they sense, to bash the insurance industry. They can shut them down. And in addition, they may sue. And when they sue, they don't just get the money that they wanted under the policy. They can get billions in punitive damages. With
a special category.
Cancer movement.
And this is a great system that we have in that insurers like United Healthcare and like the insurance companies you worked for in like life, health, and disability, not health insurance specifically, but more on the health and disability, life and disability stuff, and the car insurance companies that I've worked for, which, all of which are insurance. And because by virtue of them being insurance companies, they are under this extra lens of scrutiny of punitive damages. They have this extra burden to think about, and they have to be extra careful about denying claims, especially to their own policy holders, right? So if you have car insurance, you have uninsured motorist coverage, right? Somebody hits you and then drives away and you never find them. Or they don't have insurance when they hit you. Or they have a tiny amount of insurance and you're very hurt. So you go to your own insurer and say, hey, I've been paying premiums for this extra insurance in case one of these bad scenarios happen. You got to pay me out. those claims are especially important to society because the person who has been paying the policy premium here is now asking the person that the entity that they are, legal speak, would call it in privity of contract with. They have a relationship with this person. I've been paying premiums to you for a long time. You owe me something here. And in the same way, when somebody is young and healthy and they pay for years and years and years and years and years to insure, and then the insurer, they finally get sick, and then the insurance company then and only then denies the claim. They've been happy to collect the premiums up until then, but then they deny the claim. That sits badly with people, and because of that, regulators have stepped in and said those denials deserve extra scrutiny. And we have a system that regulates it such that they can be hit with billions or whatever, who knows, in punitive damages. A number can be decided on in punitive damages that has no connection whatsoever to the harm caused, only to the amount necessary to make the defendant, who in this case acted badly, really feel it. So plaintiffs' lawyers famously get up there and say to juries, well, how much money do you need to take out of United Healthcare?
How to send a message.
Yeah, how do you send a message? Are you going to take a day's profits? What about a month's profits? Why not? And the jury just kind of comes up with a number, and that is potentially a gigantic, massive number. Yeah. So you're right. You're absolutely right. We have these systems in place. We have regulations in place. And yet, as we look at the American healthcare system, it is very different than the rest of the world. And there are many measures of health in which Americans are doing worse than their European counterparts, or in some cases their Asian counterparts. There are other developed countries where people have better health outcomes in many ways, like longevity or rates of cancer.
Yeah. But that raises a totally separate debate, which we can get into someday after I've done weeks and weeks of study, so I won't sound stupid.
But separate from just having bad outcomes, there are good arguments to be made to say, hey, maybe it is the profit motive behind an insurance company that is a middleman that gets between people's provider, the health care provider, like a doctor, and the patient, and says, hey, I don't think that's medically necessary, so I won't pay for it. That is the thing that sets people off. And that process, whether you call it prior authorization, which is often how it's, the process of the insurance company getting to say, hey, I get to review before the doctor does a thing. I get to decide whether it pays.
It sets them off. But again, getting back to the question of whether there's a lot of critical thinking going on, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily right on the issue of socialized medicine, but it's an issue.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that in many of your Western European countries and a lot of systems around the world, if the government pays for everything, you wait a long time while you're in some pretty bad pain, and then when you finally get to the head of the line, whoops, it's poor quality care. And compare that with the capitalist approach, or at least the blendo, where you got the Medicare and the Medicaid and so on. But as I say, that's a separate debate.
Oh, yeah, that's a massive political issue.
I wanted to shift over to the question for a minute about whether this is symptomatic of a larger problem we have. And I'm thinking of this incredible exchange, which maybe you saw recently, between the acting Secret Service director, who was being grilled by a congressman, and a congressman who they got into just an absolute shouting match. And there was absolutely no civility whatsoever. I mean, they're screaming, the spittle is flying. and I mean, to me, it was just so sad to see, because here you have the hallowed halls of Congress.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing for Pussy Riot to protest during, some Clarence Thomas hearing. Fine. Let them do their thing. Nobody ever seems to be thrown into jail for that. It's just an experience they can tell their friends about. But I mean, isn't it discouraging that we can't even have a civil conversation in a setting like that, where theoretically you'd have serious people who are trying to arrive at facts so that we can make laws?
Yeah.
It's sad.
I would say there was, obviously because of UHC's in the talk, it's the talk of the town at the moment. Everybody's talking about this insurer specifically because it's the biggest health insurance company in the country. It covers like almost 50 million Americans in various plans, and it is the subject of big protests, sometimes not very civil protests. And at those protests, there are, of course, are police responses and crackdowns, and people get hurt, people get arrested. There was a big one this last year where, some number of tens of people were arrested and charged with crimes, something like disorderly conduct type crimes. And a lot of people would say,
Biden will pardon them.
maybe he should on the way out. As long as they're waving pardons around, why not? Joe, call me. I need one. The idea that we should have these conversations in a civil way, it's always tough to define civil, right? It's always tough to define what does it mean.
How about no flying spittle?
Well, how about nobody getting hurt, right? No bodily injury, right? That's not a bad barrier. Obviously, I would prefer things be even more civil than that in a perfect world, right? But the idea that we would have gotten civil rights without protests in the streets, the idea that women would have gotten the right to vote without hunger strikes and the other iron-jawed angels.
But MLK focused on nonviolent protests, so that was good.
Of course, and nonviolence is admirable. But the idea of putting yourself, for example, at a lunch counter when the owner and the police are trying to kick you out because of your race, it's not that far a leap to say that kind of a protest is a form of violence. You're putting yourself in a situation
I think it was courageous.
Oh,
because,
absolutely.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just reading a book where they gave all the details about that. These young people, they dressed nicely and they went into the lunch counter, so there was no question they weren't a bunch of ruffians.
Right.
They just asked for coffee and a donut.
Yeah.
And they put their lives at risk.
Exactly.
And the reaction led to the civil rights laws.
Right.
It was great, but it wasn't violent.
Well, of course.
There was violence in response.
Well, that's the thing. They're wreaking violence on themselves, right? They're putting themselves in harm's way.
Right,
and in
that's
true.
That's
in the
true.
same way that they are putting themselves in harm's way, there are many protesters out there who put themselves in harm's way nowadays, Greta Thunberg style, get dragged off, yelling and screaming by the police,
right.
And people say, oh, these violent protests, look, it turned violent. Well, who turned it violent, right? It was obviously the cops dragging people away from lunch counters, and it's obviously the cops dragging Greta away from the steps of Congress or whatever turns it violent.
The image of those fire hoses on the civil rights demonstrators were peaceably marching in Selma and other places in the Deep South.
Right.
That's what led to the civil rights reforms of the 60s. So people were shocked and stunned by the images.
Right. So when we look at, the protests outside of UHC, maybe some of the protesters were graffitiing, maybe some of the protesters were yelling and screaming and disrupting things, but they got arrested for disorderly conduct. They put themselves in the line of fire using this form of violence.
Fine, whatever. If anybody is going to ignore the fact that a guy has been murdered.
Oh, no, and nobody should be ignoring that. And that's obviously a very different form of violence.
I think Taylor Lorenz, the former Washington Post reporter, had to kind of back off of her initial statement.
Well, she probably did. I think a lot of people, though, are talking about the fact that we're being asked to respond to the violent act of denying coverage for, denying the medical necessity of treatment that doctors think is necessary, the patient wants to undergo, and that the insurer steps in the middle and says, we're not going to do that. That can also be construed as a violent act.
Well,
and I think
you
that
can construe it, but I would say that it's super, super duper rare that a denial could be characterized as violent, because to me, if you're going to make it a metaphorical act of violence, it has to be malicious. It has to be somebody inside the company saying, you know what, we care a whole lot more about the bottom line of this insurance company than we do about human beings.
I think you're right. That's a really good way to focus on it. When it does come down to, are we doing this for cost-cutting reasons versus rooting out true fraud?
And how many people who are protesting really have any idea that there's a shred of malice there?
Well, we don't know that, but we do know.
You can in a lawsuit. That's when you get punitive damages. Malice, oppression, and fraud justifies punitive damages. You're absolutely right.
And there was a very, very big ProPublica expose. I don't know if you have heard about this, but of course it's resurfaced now, and people are reading the story again. People are talking about it again. The ProPublica story about United Healthcare's denial of this Penn State college student who had ulcerative colitis. Right? I don't know if you saw it. It popped up. It's repeated and now reposted, gone viral all over again. But it was about a guy who had ulcerative colitis, was a college basketball player, and just terrible, horrible symptoms, totally debilitating. Basically chained to a bathroom, can't function anymore, drops out of school, drops out of whatever. It's over until his doctors, get it under control after years of trying different therapies. And United Healthcare was paying about $2 million a year for this guy's care. And this guy's care got denied. Then they said it was not medically necessary, and he should go back to the other treatments that his doctors had tried over the previous 2 years that were much cheaper than that and that weren't working, and that these other treatments were saving his life and relieving him of the horrific symptoms of his incurable disease. And they said, well, In our opinion, though, it's not medically necessary. We want to stop paying $2 million a year. And the lawsuit that followed, the unusual lawsuit that followed, usually people just have to stomach this and suffer in medical debt and move on. The lawsuit that followed revealed a lot of insider communications about how we need to keep looking at this claim over and over until we find a way to deny it because it's so expensive.
Oh,
and
sure.
the whole because
if
it's
there's
so
a smoking
expensive,
gun like that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Ford Pinto, right? I mean, how many lives can we cost our cars owners and drivers and passengers, but save money on a recall of the product? That's the sort of thing that people intuitively know or feel is happening inside these insurance
companies. They think
companies.
it's happening, but how often does it happen? That's what the court system is for. And the fact that you have a jury system where all 12 of the jurors, almost all of them, they hate insurance companies, have had horrible experiences because they think they've been ripped off. It's like looking down the barrel of a gun in the form of 12 people on the jury. Yeah. Hey, we gotta get to guess the verdict. You ready for this?
I'm excited. I haven't done a guess the verdict in months.
I know. This resuming the feature.
This used to be a staple, but now I need to get back in the zone, back in the mindset. I'm a juror.
So I'm
sitting on a jury.
I'm going to give Connor the facts of a case. It involves a woman named Chesty Love. And he's going to guess the outcome. Her name really is Cynthia Hess. She's an exotic dancer.
I figured.
She's known as Chesty Love. She claimed a $200,000 deduction on her taxes for the cost of surgical implants, which enlarged her bust size to 56FF. The IRS turned down the deduction, Connor, saying money spent to improve a person's appearance is just cosmetic.
Right.
It's personal. It's not a business expense.
Yeah.
So she took the IRS to tax court. So we're in tax court. Chesty's on one side.
Right.
The evil IRS is on the other.
Yeah.
How do you think tax court handled this dispute?
You're absolutely right. You reading the facts of this and the IRS in their initial opinion that you can't, no matter how much your appearance depends on cosmetic appearance, you can't charge surgery to the company credit card, basically, in this case.
Can't deduct it from your taxes.
Exactly. This is something that benefits someone, every day as part of their personal life. It's something about how they want to present themselves. If you want to be, I want to be a famous actor, so I'm going to go out and get the Tom Brady jaw surgery or whatever it was. And don't sue me, Tom. I don't mean to defame. No one thinks you got all those surgeries.
He's so busy being on TV, he wouldn't have. Doesn't have time to sue you.
Exactly. Okay. It would be good for the press on our pod if he did. So come at me, Tom. But yeah, the personal appearance is a very specific. People want to look a certain way for a million reasons, and then they also monetize themselves in every way. I mean, if your job involves physical labor, you can't write off going to the gym so that you're stronger, right? If you want to be a celebrity, you can't write off your nose job. If you want to if you want to practice law like we do, you can't write off law school, even though it would improve your ability to do that thing. It's also a thing that you're doing for yourself. So that's the basis, the underlying idea here. There's a big difference between an expense you need in order to succeed in your business, surgery, because it's just a cost of doing business, versus something you do for yourself.
So how do you apply this sage principle of the law to Chesty's situation?
Chesty's cosmetic surgery is not going to be tax deductible because, she wants to look a certain way and then she makes money off it, but this is for her, right? That's the argument. The argument on the other side by her, we're playing devil's advocate, we're doing both sides here, is that maybe she doesn't want to look like this. Maybe this is a miserable experience for her, in which case the IRS would probably say, well, maybe a different line of work. But, I think if I were the IRS, I think I would have a strong argument.
So tax court judge, you're the tax court judge.
If I'm the tax court judge who's presiding over this, I say, sorry, Chesty, I think the IRS should win because this is something you probably did for yourself.
Sorry, Connor. She won. So Judge Joan Tate, a woman on the bench, ruled.
Why does that matter? Why does it matter she's a woman? Why does it matter, Royal?
It's very important to the factual scenario. I don't know why, but I'm just confident it is. Yeah. Joan Tate ruled the new breasts were so large and cumbersome, roughly 10 pounds each. There was no
10 pounds each.
There was no personal benefit. She ruled the implants, quote, contorted her body into a grotesque appearance, all for the making of money.
Okay, rude. I mean, the lady comes into your court, you're presiding over her case, and suddenly you're saying
the
she's
lady
grotesque.
happy, okay? Big winner.
A big 10 pounds each winner. Yeah, all right. Big
judge
winner.
pointed out Chesty Love's income went from $1,600 a month to $14,000 a month after the operation. So Chesty won the court case.
Well, if they're big enough, it makes sense. That puts us in the devil's advocate scenario. Yeah.
You see, as you pointed out, we haven't done Guess the Verdict for a while, so you're out of practice.
I'm rusty. I'll get back on the horse
I'm sure next week will be much better.
Exactly.
Hey, please stick around because our producer, Joey, is going to insert a news package I have recorded on the subject of the CEO violence. So
and remember, don't murder people.
It's like
we don't think you should murder people.
No, it's true.
Anti-murder.
We're unanimous on
Unanimously anti-murder. It's the only thing we agree on.
So this is premium content that you don't even have to pay for.
Wow.
Start right about now. Thank you for watching Too Many Lawyers, and we'll see you next week. Is this really what we've come to? A guy assassinates a health insurance company CEO on the streets of Manhattan, and some people say right on? It makes you wonder if this era of toxic partisanship is out of control. The killer apparently left some metallic calling cards, shell casings with words that seem to be protesting the fact that the CEO's company has a higher than average rate of denials of claims for health benefits. Some were shocked by the view of journalist Taylor Lorenz, who said, hey, it's natural to hope insurance executives will die, given how they ruin people's lives. But the reporter wasn't alone. Lots of folks jumped on her bandwagon, echoing the idea that those who deny health claims don't deserve to live. But what about the larger issue that we seem to have devolved into a society where everybody has a hair trigger, at least figuratively?
You know why you were there? Because you wanted to be visible, because you weren't auditioning for this job.
I was there to pay respect for a fallen member of this agency.
You endangered President
out of line,
Biden's life,
Congressman.
Vice President Harris's life, because you put those agents out of position.
Mr.
Did you have a radio with you?
Mr. Fallon, your time has expired.
So instead of a civil conversation between a congressman and the Secret Service director, there was an epidemic of spittle-flying fury. Whatever happened to the sage advice of Rodney King?
Can we all get along? Can we get along? Can we stop making it horrible for the older people and the kids?
And it's not just in Congress. These days, passengers consider it a good flight if they don't wind up on YouTube. It's like everybody took the advice of Peter Finch's character in the movie Network.
I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
But now the violence has reached up to the highest political levels, with 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life within 64 days. It's a weird fact, but after a 2-decade epidemic of political violence, we had a 40-year hiatus. Let's go back to the Kennedy assassination in 1963. Then Martin Luther King.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there.
And Robert Kennedy, both in 1968. Followed by shootings targeting George Wallace and President Gerald Ford twice in a single month in 1975. And finally, the attempt on Ronald Reagan's life in 1981. That's 7 shootings in 18 years. But then, essentially no political violence for 4 decades before the 2 attempts on Trump's life this year. Even the unifying force of America coming under attack on 9/11 didn't stop the vile rhetoric. Professor Ward Churchill said those in the Twin Towers deserved to die. They were little Eichmanns, tools of oppressive capitalism. There's not much cause for optimism. Just weeks ago, a study of 2,000 people concluded the appetite for partisan violence is increasing. Some 10% of society supports violence to achieve political goals. Charles Bronson made a career out of playing a subway vigilante. The first Death Wish film came out in '74. Then 10 years later, Bernard Goetz brought it to life. Lots of folks rooted for Bronson's character and for Goetz. So what's the answer? Anger management classes in grade school? Maybe hope that when Donald Trump retires, things get better? Maybe we need a national New Year's resolution. Try to get through family dinners without a food fight. For Too Many Lawyers, I'm Royal Oakes.